Hey all, how you doing? Early morning. It's morning optimism with Eck and Mike,
Well, maybe from one of us.
or breakfast. That was pretty bad. I was trying to find something.
No, somebody made a comment. A friend of mine made a comment yesterday about my negativity. Russ will be Russ was happy yesterday because Jacob deGrom, the pitcher for the Mets, got extended 5 years for like $140 million. And the first thing that came to mind was, yeah, in a month he'll blow out his arm. Because that's usually the way it happens. They get this long-term deal. Or one of the Yankees pitchers, he got a 4-year extension, and then all of a sudden he's got a sore rotator cuff. So it's like it almost never fails. That happens.
No, it's
a 4-year extension, and then all of a sudden he's got a sore rotator. Got the replay.
We're in an endless mic loop. Stop. Sorry, I apologize.
Yeah, it was my thought was so profound. We needed to hear it twice.
I had to hear it twice. Yes, I apologize. Jeez. Yeah, and it's what happens when you do things early in the morning. But yeah, baseball. Hey, kids should still play baseball. You're gonna make that kind of money. I'm telling you. I mean, as much as like it is like, I was joking with the parents the other day about about the worst sports to watch your kids play in. Because as you grow up, you have my kids have played almost everything. No one played football here. I played tons of football. I was a quarterback and freshman from the freshman high school team. But
if you base it on the reaction of the parents, I would say it's youth hockey, because
youth hockey is fun to go to.
Well, not when you're dealing with psychotic parents. And
no, there's definitely psychotic parents, and there's a lot of like entitled parents in youth hockey, because there's money in youth hockey, and people feel like there's for whatever it's worth. But actually going to those are fun games. Like my buddy, none of my kids played youth hockey, which is very sad for me. But means I can also eat, at the end of the month, because youth hockey is incredibly expensive.
Yes.
But I've gone to my kid plays youth hockey, and often they play out here near us, even though they live in South Jersey, and they play a team out here. And I go to those games. They are crazy. They're fun though. I mean, I'm always so jealous. Like, this is crazy, because I grew up, my daughter played soccer mostly. Soccer's, I've gotten into it over the years because I've been an assistant coach. If I was just a parent watching it, I think I would lose my mind. But as assistant coach, I'm doing things. But if I was just watching it, I think I would definitely lose my mind. But the worst by far, T-ball is pretty bad. That's why I started this whole thing, because T-ball, where everybody bats every inning and people hit off the tee, and it's just like there's no score being kept. That's pretty much a lesson in monotony. But the worst by far, there's no two ways about it, is swimming. Okay, swimming is the worst, because first of all, you're going into dank, humid buildings, that are like, because even in the middle of winter, they got to be like 80 degrees in there or whatever. So you're coming out of the cold. You've got all this heavy stuff on because it's freezing. You're stepping into an 85 degree. You're peeling off stuff. Everybody's sweating. It feels like germs are just hovering in the air. And to watch kids swim when everybody looks exactly the same. Okay, so everybody's got like the same uniform on, the same hat on. Cap on, and you just watch them swim back and forth, and it's like,
yeah, you're selling me on it right now.
So it gets to the point. Like, I was there. I remember going to my daughter's first meet, and I was there, showed up with my son, and my wife's like, "You can take your time because she's not swimming for a while." I'm like, "Okay, fine." And we get there, and I'm like, "What meet is it now?" It's meet B16. I'm like, "Well, what meet is she swimming in?" She's swimming in J42, like that kind of thing. I was like, how the hell is this kept? So I remember being so hot, going outside in short sleeves in the snow for a second to get relief from the heat.
Mm-hmm.
Just like, the swimming is the worst by far. I really feel for people. Like, one of my buddies' daughter is going for a scholarship in swimming. I just, oh God.
You're making me feel good that I didn't have kids.
Yeah. Yeah, youth sports are one of the joys of children, but that's one of them you want to definitely stay away from.
Yeah.
What I want to talk about for a second, we'll get right into this show in the morning. We're doing this today because of scheduling, so I definitely want to do a show. I've missed too many shows, so you have to put up with me today. One of my guilty pleasures is the show Finding Bigfoot. Okay.
Never seen it.
Which you've never seen, right? So
never seen it.
As you can imagine, they haven't. They haven't found Bigfoot. Or you probably would have heard about it.
Cliffhanger.
That's one of the things that you can be sure of. If you've never seen Finding Bigfoot, you do know how it ends. They're in their 12th season. This is the final season of Finding Bigfoot.
So maybe they'll find it this time?
Yeah, you wonder, And it's funny, their optimism is still, but I don't know if anybody's out there has seen it. If you've seen it, you feel free to comment on it because it's so much fun. It is really literally, my son calls it finding trees. Like what it is and he's absolutely dead on right about it. It's these guys walking through the woods at night, with these cameras on and every episode, it's like it is the best show by far ever at cliffhangers or teasers. Like it's the kind of thing like, coming up and you'll see a guy like, oh my God, what's that? And then, and then they'll go to commercial and they'll come back and they'll be like, oh my God, what's that? And that's just a beaver.
It's an owl.
Yeah, it is the funniest thing. And it's just the way they do it. It's amazing that they've gotten 12 years out of this is off the charts. Unbelievable. It's the biggest miracle in television history.
I think it's also a commentary on the gullibility of the fan base.
It's become like, how many ways can they not find Bigfoot? Like,
well, I'll come to the defense of the people who watch Finding Bigfoot because
yeah.
There is an audience for crap like Say Yes to the Dress.
Oh yeah.
I have female relatives that watch this show religiously, and I'm like, what the hell are you watching?
Oh, I know. There's no question. There's that. I got hooked on Siesta Key, the reality show, which is ridiculous. And I'm not, my daughter watches Big Brother all the time, loves it. But it's just very funny how, all those things are like relationship based, and that's, you can always build a show off relationships, but building a show off of not finding something for 12 years.
Yeah.
And I'm a person who, like, before this show, believe maybe Bigfoot could possibly exist. Like I'm not like, not likely, but possible.
I have to say, and then we'll start the show. I have to say that maybe 4 or 5 years ago, I would have thought it would be impossible for me to be and not be. I know the term cord cutter is put out there, but to be somebody who would not subscribe to cable, other than live sports. There's nothing I really watch. I'm looking forward to Game of Thrones on HBO, but once Game of Thrones is over with, plus you can get HBO via like YouTube Live or other.
You don't need, you really don't need.
Right. And the way the cable companies are charging right now, I'm paying like $250 a month for cable and internet and phone and all that stuff. I'm sorry. It's like other than like the center ice package and watching Yankee games on TV, I don't watch like I can get the news on like the basic cable package. It's a waste of money. I'm getting to the point now where I'm probably gonna be somebody who significantly pares down what I get from cable and maybe even go to some other avenue because it's just not worth it.
Well, and it is. Live sports are the only reason to have cable these days. And there is no two ways about that. And the other thing is, though, of course, the cable companies are the ones that are serving our internet to us, right? So
yes,
that was where cable companies were smart. But they kind of, it was a pretty obvious fit. They were already running cables into our house, right? So
what they're doing, Ak, is they're increasing. Like if you want to get just high speed internet and you're not getting cable or just getting basic cable, they've boosted the price of that to the point now that it makes more sense just to get the cable because there's not much savings.
Well, you know what's happening, and it's happening in the industry, also in the newspaper industry. If you subscribe to the New York Times, I think it is online.
Yeah, you get the paper.
Yeah, it's cheaper if you get the paper as well delivered to you, which is like crazy. And of course, that's all because the advertising in the paper, like they're trying to sell the advertising. It's the same thing with cable TV. It's going to go the same way. Like there's no question that cable TV will eventually be almost free. It'll just be one. I think that's what's going to happen. It'll become like a free thing that gets sent to you because the when you buy your internet, you get a certain speed of internet, you get cable for free. It's almost there now. It's really close enough now.
Yeah. Well, the funny thing is that the Buffalo News does it the exact opposite of the way you described it for the New York Times. If you buy the paper, you get the online for free.
It used to be that.
Yeah, they're still doing that, but
They're still doing that, but
yeah.
and that's the funny thing is though I've even heard the opposite though, where it actually exists the opposite direction too, where and that's because they want to sell. The advertising on newspapers is really what newspapers live off of. That's how newspapers survive for so many years.
Right.
So and it's going to be the same here. I mean, it's going to be the same here for sure. It's going to be the fact that you're going to just get I can't wait for the first internet company or / cable company like Comcast to say Comcast basic cable is now free, and the internet and they just take they put the price, they move the price up of the of the internet itself and make the cable TV free. And
right.
Then hopefully people will say, oh, I'll pay $5 for HBO, I'll pay this, whatever.
Right.
That's the way they should do it. That's the way it'll.
Well, that was the plan.
Money no matter how they slice it. It's just a matter of how they do it, right? So
that was the plan years ago. There was supposed to be sort of an a la carte type of approach to cable, where like you, instead of the packages that you were getting, that you could say, I want this channel, but I don't want that channel. But they're still doing it with packages. It's like the silver package, you don't get the NHL Network, but the gold package, you do get the NHL Network.
Right. That makes me crazy too. Like but at this point, really we just need some cable company to say, here's every channel in the world. If you want it, pay for every channel in the world. Because I would pay money to get TSN, or Sportsnet down in America. Of course, there's other ways to do that too. We all know that, but there's But that's not either here nor there. Anyway, let's move on.
Okay.
I was a Bill C in the chat room saying PlayStation View. It says I had PlayStation View because it was one of the only places I could find Nesson for the Bruins. Yeah, like PlayStation View is actually a really good service in general. Like they have a lot of good hockey stuff on there, and PlayStation Hockey app is good too. And PlayStation itself is fun, so that's not a bad way to go. Hulu does, and Skis 36 is saying that YouTube TV and Hulu have live sports NHL games at least, and they do. That's for sure. Although I've always had trouble getting the Hulu NHL games to work for me for some reason. I don't know why. It's just
Yeah.
But that's, I think maybe I have to pay something I don't know I'm not paying or whatever. But there's definitely issues. I mean, and Apple just had a big thing 2 days ago about all the stuff that they're doing. So there's it's we're
it's an evolution right now.
Cable TV as we know it is gone. And for hockey fans, there's got to be there's better options. We should do it at some point. The best way to watch hockey online. We should definitely do a show about that.
Sure.
So. All right.
Illegally.
Yes. All right, here we go. Let's get going here. Today we're going to talk about the race to the bottom, kids. All right.
Something I'm an expert at.
We'll figure if I just have Mike, I might as well do we'll just talk about the worst possible scenarios for all the teams. Or the best, depending on how you look at it. Mm-hmm. Hello, Hockey World. Today is Wednesday, March 27th, 2019. Good morning.
I'm Michael Agello.
And I am Eklund, and you're watching the HockeyBuzzcast on HockeyBuzz.com. The podcast comes every Monday through Friday at this time, or not usually at this time, but at a time to fill you in on the comings and goings in the hockey world. We're doing early today for scheduling purposes. We really thank you all for joining us. And thanks so many good people in the chat room. You guys are up early too, which is nice to see.
Yeah, we'll take some questions at the end of the show.
Questions at the end of the show too. We're going to first talk about last night because it was only a few hours ago that these games ended. It's early for us. Early for a hockey writer, 9:30 in the morning, that's for sure, to talk. So we're going to do our best here. So Columbus. Let's start with Columbus for a second because Columbus beat the Islanders in their second 4-0 in their second straight pretty dominating win that Columbus has had, and I believe, am I right about that?
Yeah, they had a 5-0 win over on the weekend. Yeah,
this is 2 shutouts in a row for them.
Yeah, Bobrovsky's got 3, and I think his last 4 starts.
Yeah, so Bob's stepping up, which is good for Bob because he's going to have to get a contract this year this summer from somewhere. But awesome for the Blue Jackets, who really needed this one last night in a huge way, and combined with Carolina's loss to Washington, makes things a little tighter. I think what you're seeing with Columbus though, in winning these games in dominating fashion, is you're starting to see Columbus maybe putting together the pieces that they got at the trade deadline, and you're starting to see what could be actually a dangerous team if they keep going.
Well, I mean, the thing is, and I mentioned it yesterday, that you have that big game on Thursday. It's Columbus and Montreal, and I think, and not to say it's all going to come down to that because it's one game, but with Columbus at 88 points, Montreal winning last night, them at 90. Columbus has a game in hand, so they can gain ground on Montreal that way. But if you beat Montreal, that gives you a leg up, and if Montreal beats you, that opens up a 4-point advantage. So I mean, at the absolute worst, Columbus has got to get a point out of that game. But honestly, I think they need to win in regulation. They are playing better. Bobrovsky's getting shutouts. They're scoring some goals, but they're still behind. And right now, 2 points. You think 2 points is nothing? 2 points is a lot.
No, 2 points is a ton right now. I mean, the reality of the schedules, though, is it does work well for Columbus. And that's why I keep. And I know you're saying Columbus and Montreal, and when you look at the standings right now, that makes a ton of sense. But I think this comes down to Montreal and Carolina. I think Columbus makes it just based on who they're playing and based on who's Carolina's playing, which is just really. Carolina, like last night, loses to Washington. They have got Washington again on Thursday.
Yeah.
And the other games they have left are, I mean, they've got New Jersey. That's the one game they have. That's easy. The rest of the way beyond that, they've got Pittsburgh, and they've got 2 against Philly, who will be playing hard because they play Carolina tough, and Philly's not. We've seen they're not trying to tank. At all. And then the other game they have is against Pittsburgh, who's playing for. So I mean, Pittsburgh and Toronto. So it's Washington, Philly, Pittsburgh, Toronto, New Jersey, Philly. That's Carolina's schedule. That's tough.
Yeah, I mean, Toronto may not give them because right now Toronto is in a mode where they may be alternating Sparks and Anderson down the stretch and giving some players a little bit of rest. So that might be an easier game than normal for Carolina going into Toronto. But yeah, I mean, it's a tough schedule. And I know Montreal ends the season on a Saturday night at the Bell Center against Toronto. And if you don't think, even if the Leafs are home and cooled out, that they won't want to win that game to eliminate Montreal, you got another thing coming, because their entire fan base will basically say, put everybody in there and beat the Habs. We hate them.
Well, Montreal's schedule is no breeze either. I mean, to not be on that Toronto game, the other games they have are, like you mentioned, Columbus. And then Winnipeg, Tampa, and Washington. Yeah. I mean, those are 3 potential cup teams. I mean, Montreal's got their work, and it's at Columbus, and it's at Winnipeg, and it's at Washington. So you're looking at 3 games on the road. Washington and Pittsburgh are in this battle that's going to really come down to the end, I think, and it's a battle that matters a lot. So.
And more than likely, Montreal is going to probably play Carey Price in every game down the stretch. Yeah. Can't see them playing, Niemi or anybody else. If you're going to go down, you're going to go down with your best guy.
They have to, no question. Meanwhile, looking at Columbus's schedule, at Montreal, like you mentioned, which is tough. Then they go to Nashville, which is going to be tough. And then they go to Buffalo.
Yeah.
They're home against Boston, which will be tricky, but they end on the last 2 days of the season with in New York against the Rangers and in Ottawa. So this does favor Columbus to get in.
It's strange. Columbus has played Boston, I think, 3 times in March.
Yeah, recently.
Yeah, I think they played them a bunch of times. It's like, I mean,
no, they played them on the 12th. The 16th, and now again on the 2nd of April. So
I know this is taking a little bit of a deviation from what we're talking about, but I really think that the NHL schedule makers should review their. I mean, I know it's based on available dates, but like the NFL, the one thing the NFL does right in terms of scheduling, and Major League Baseball does this too, is in the stretch, like in September and October, or late early October, at the end of the regular season for baseball, you play your division opponents. You play the Yankees, play Boston, Baltimore, Toronto, etc. And sometimes in football, most of the time they try to keep it either conference games or division games late in the season.
Yeah,
I don't think playing like Columbus playing Winnipeg in the last week of March it makes a lot of sense. It should be at worst mostly all conference games, and at best interdivision, because then I think, those rivalries, those battles for playoff spots. I mean, if you're going to justify having the playoffs be interdivision, then at the end of the regular season, it should be interdivision as well.
I agree, and usually they do it pretty well. This is the weirdest year, I think, for that, because for some reason this year we're getting way more of that. I remember a couple years there where we were almost to say we were done out of conference games, like that at some point. And this year, you haven't been able to say that at all. Like, you're really looking at a bunch of conference games that are still going, a bunch of out of conference games that are still going. I mean, but it feels different. I don't know. It must have been, like you're saying, it's probably just buildings being more active, probably more bands touring. It's all I can think of. There's got to be something, happening like that.
It's bizarre, but I mean, I really think it takes away from. And in a way, it's inherently unfair, because I mean, especially if you're playing like a top team in the West. I mean, I haven't seen any cake matchups, as I would say, like easy ones when it comes to Western Conference teams. I mean, it's mostly Winnipeg crossing over, or Nashville. I know if Nashville played Toronto. I mean, I think that there has to. I know Chicago played a bunch of games in the East. They should get those road trips and things of that nature done in, say, February, and have March be exclusively interconference and interdivision when he can.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Let's take a second now to look at the race for the bottom, because the race for the bottom is interesting. I mean, Ottawa is obviously the team right now with the worst record in hockey, and
and of course they have the worst record, and they're not going to benefit from it. But
right, and they're trying. I mean, they won 2 games in a row here. They won last night, so winning 2 games in a row for Ottawa, that's something that hasn't happened all that often. Right now they're at 60 points. My projections have them finishing at 61. Like, the rest of their schedule is pretty tricky for them, and that they'll get 1 more point perhaps in there, but I mean, they could get more than that. They're playing hard. They're playing best. So right above them, 4 points ahead of them are the LA Kings, and they're at 64 points right now. And my projection time is ending at 68. I think that so above them is Detroit, New Jersey, and Buffalo. Now your Buffalo is 11 points ahead of Ottawa, and the Rangers are as well. So those are I think basically we're looking at only 5 or so games. Ottawa's got a really good shot at finishing last overall, obviously. The Kings, are not playing great hockey. Like last night they lost to the Oilers.
They got destroyed by the Oilers.
Pretty handily, yeah. I mean,
the thing is that, I mean, starting with Ottawa, I mean, we know it's a tire fire. We know the whole situation with Melnyk, and I mean, the talk recently over the last week or so has been that they're looking to add a president of hockey operations, somebody to be a buffer between Pierre Dorion and Melnyk. And believe me, I think that Pierre Dorion, if he could operate the team without the interference of Melnyk, sometimes I think it would be a better process going forward. But we don't know what their next coach is going to be, so that's up in the air. Dorion is, I think, safe there. But it's really destructive, and we knew that this was going to happen. And I know they got Brady Tkachuk with that first round pick, but this was a year where everything had to do with not finishing last overall. And then at the deadline, with them trading Stone and Dzingel and Duchesne, they got good returns for them, but still until the lottery, which I think is April 9th. If there'll be a giant sigh of relief in Ottawa if Colorado doesn't get the number 1 pick, even if it's second or third, I think they can live with that, because I think Tkachuk was 4th. But if they give up the number 1 and it's Jack Hughes, or they give up the number 2 and it's Capo Caco, and one of these guys turns out to be a star, then that organization, if you think they've been excoriated before, they will be raked over the coals then.
Well, yeah, and there's a lot of talk. I mean, about I personally love the way the system works now for getting the first overall pick in the lottery. I think it's a great system. I think it's because, I mean, the first overall right now is an 18.5% chance.
Yeah,
and
I won't think it's great if Edmonton gets it again. I'm for putting in something that says, if you win the lottery, In,
I'm 100% for that too.
in 2015, you cannot, even if you win the lottery, you'll pick second.
Yeah, I think you should never be able to get the first pick overall twice in a row. I mean,
Right.
I do agree with you 100% on that, and I think that, and now with Edmonton, I mean Edmonton right now is at a 3% chance, so they're really 3.5%. I mean, the way Ottawa is as bad as they've been, as horrible, and it doesn't matter how much more horrible you get, they can't get any better than 18.5% chance of getting the first overall pick.
Right.
And getting a top 3 pick is about 50% for Ottawa. So
right.
That's the way it works out. That to me is pretty significant. When you look at this, when you look at how this plays out, I really think that it's a pretty steady decline, but at the same time, I was trying to think at which point it really does make sense to want to lose. Like, obviously you want to get the best percentage you can, but it's done pretty well where it goes from 18.5 to 13.5 to 11.5 to 9.5. So basically by the time you get the top 3 are the only 3 teams that have a greater than 10% chance of getting the first pick.
Right.
Or fourth is 9.5. So say the top 4 teams.
I mean, it's sort of like the system that was in play, and not in terms of percentages, but in terms of the top 5 really have. I mean, if you add up the odds of the top 5, I think it's over 50%. So really, I mean, if you're Ottawa, LA, Detroit, and then New Jersey or Buffalo, you have around a 10% or closer to 20% chance, but then it gets into 3%, 4%. It's like those aren't realistic. I mean, it happens. It's there are long shots in horse racing, so there are long shots come through in hockey and in lotteries. But the teams that have the most realistic chances are the ones that are in the bottom 5. And I mean, right now we know LA, they're going to have a new coach next year. They're probably going to be some significant roster changes, I would think, because we know that they've tried to do some as much as they could in season. But I think Rob Blake looks at that team and their slowness afoot, and really I think has to address that to get up to speed with the rest of the league. And there've been rumors of Todd McClellan being the possible destination, the head coach going to LA. Detroit, I mean, it's a slow build, and they've had I didn't think they were a playoff team going into the year. I think they've had some good performances. Jimmy Howard played well, and they re-signed him for another year, but they're really rebuilding, and I don't know whether Detroit is going to get big into free agency or try to do offer sheets or anything of that nature, because they have a lot of cap space. But to me, I think they're better off doing what they're doing, slowly building with Zadina and Mantha and Larkin and the kids that they're bringing along. I'll tell you that and I mentioned this before we started, the Sabres and the Buffalo fan base, and because I'm here, I'm more attuned to what's going on. There's almost an insurrection going on in terms of the way the Sabres fans are reacting to the Sabres organization this year. I think the worst thing that happened to them was the 10-game winning streak, because once that happened, everybody said, we're good again. We have a chance for a playoff spot. And then this team, since that 10-game winning streak, has been the worst team in the NHL, and everybody's turning if they're not turning their guns on Phil Housley, they're turning their guns on Jason Botterill, and they're turning their attention to the ownership of this team. And Terry Pegula and Kim Pegula had a press conference yesterday in Arizona, I think, where the NFL is having some meetings, because he's owner of the Bills as well. And all he talked about was, he gave sort of tacit backing and approval of Housley, and that's the last thing that anybody wants to hear here, because Housley right now is the poster child for 2 years of failure.
Yeah,
and I don't know. Like, I mean, I said last week I thought Housley was going to keep his job, because Botterill, if he fires Housley, then he's the next guy on the firing line. You get one coach, you hire your second coach, and there's failure next year, then everybody's going to be looking at Botterill in terms of why is this team not winning. But That's why I think they'll keep Housley. But this is, this fan base is sick and tired of friggin' losing. They're tired of it. And the Pagulas have had a real easy time in terms of, they fire coaches, they fire general managers every couple years, and they sell the rebuild, and we saved the Sabres, we saved the Bills, but at a certain point, saving them and keeping them in Buffalo, it's one thing, but you want these teams to win, and people are sick and tired of losing.
Yeah, and you can hardly blame them. I mean, absolutely. But it's tricky because they are improving. They have shown signs of improving. I think the Ottawa. I think what the Sabres have to do is they need to just sign Skinner, and if they do that, at least that shows forward movement. Like if they don't do that, then.
Well, it's not completely under their control. I mean, they can offer him a max deal and they can offer him $9 million, and he may not want to sign here. I mean, you would think that it would have been done by now, but and he's not helping his cause because I think he scored 1 goal in the last 2 months.
So the people in the chat room are getting on Carter Hutton about this. Sorry.
Well, okay. I know that the expectation, and this is the thing, and we've talked about Carter Hutton, jokingly. He's not a starting goaltender. He's not a number 1 goaltender. He had a great half season with St. Louis. St. Louis is in general, a good defensive club. He came out of the Nashville system. Nashville is a solid defensive club. The Sabres are not. The Sabres, and during the 10-game win streak, he played great. His save percentage is in the 800s since then. He's not a starting goalie. I think he was a stopgap to hopefully fill and play 35 to 40 games to let Linus Ullmark get a, sort of slow entree into the league. And Ullmark really hasn't played that great down the stretch, but this is a team that, right now defensively, they're not inept, but they're not great. And their forwards are not deep. So you put a lot of weight on these goaltenders, and unless it's a goalie, unless you go out there and sign Sergei Bobrovsky, which I don't think is going to happen. I don't know where the answer is in terms of getting an improvement in goal until Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen, their second-round pick from a couple years ago, who won the World Junior with Finland and is playing in the OHL right now, until he gets enough experience to be in the NHL. And that's the whole Carter Hart argument that we've had. This is a 19-year-old kid. It's going to be at least 2 years until he's ready. Yeah, and you can't throw in a 20-year-old goaltender behind a bad defense and expect him to stand on his head. You ruin goaltenders like that. So either you're going to have to improve the team in front of Hutton and Ullmark and get them to be able to play, make it more advantageous for them to play better, or you got to go out and trade for a goaltender and hope that guy stands on his head.
Yeah. Although you got to love the name Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen. That's just such a great name.
Yeah. It rolls off the tongue.
It is. It's just, and I've heard great things about him. There are some really good young goalies out there. I know Columbus has high hopes on Elvis. He's going to be such as, and if he's all as advertised, I think that's the reason that they are not signing Bobrovsky.
Yeah. Can you imagine the mask with sideburns?
Yeah, it's going to be amazing. It'll be quite a show when he comes over, and it's going to be good for that city and everything like that. That's going to give them some hope because they're going to need it after they, when they lose guys this summer.
Well, we've realized this year, Eck, how valuable a commodity goaltending is.
Oh, yeah.
Because of the backup situations, especially like Toronto and Carolina scrambling for goaltending after training camp and picking up McElhinney and signing Mrazek. With the expansion to 32 teams, I don't think there are a lot of organizations out there that have 3 or 4 or 5 goaltenders like they did in the past.
Yeah, I'm looking at the Predators right now going into the playoffs. They're in a really interesting case because Saros, who has really played well lately, and and Rene, who has struggled a bit. This is a real tough spot the Predators are in going into the playoffs with their goaltending situation because it's obvious that Rene, after last year's playoff performance, which left a lot to be desired. what they end up here, what they're going to do here is, they're going to start with Rene for sure, but knowing Laviolette, it's not going to be quick. It's not going to take very long to go to Saros.
Well, if they go down 3-0 in the first round series,
I think it's bigger than that. I mean, I think it's getting to the point where Laviolette almost sees them as a 1 and a 1A, and that sounds crazy to people out there, but you got to remember this is Peter Laviolette, and goaltenders.
Yeah,
he has a really short leash with goaltenders once he doesn't trust them. And what happened last year definitely has Laviolette thinking twice. I think one bad game by Rene and you could go to Saros, and doesn't mean you couldn't go back to Rene. That's the one thing about Peter. Peter, we've seen before. It's not like usually you go away from Rene and then you're never going back to him.
Well, Washington started Grubauer in their first round series, and he lost the first 2 games, and then they went to Holtby. I mean, Rene's not having as bad a year as Holtby was having last year,
right? And Rene, and the question will just be, can he find that level in the playoffs, and that'll be the whole key. I mean, because Saros is a much better goalie than I think that people give him credit for. He's very quick goalie. Made a couple of saves in the last game I watched. Just like deflection saves that were phenomenal.
Well, the one thing that people don't factor in, and now they use the term load management in the NBA for guys like Kawhi Leonard, who are sitting out games because they don't want them to be too taxed when it gets to the playoffs. But in the NHL with 82 games, and you have a veteran goaltender like Rene, who I think is 37 or 38 years old, you may have to, in a playoff series. I know that usually there's a day in between games, but if you're up 2-1 in the series and you have a home game and you have a backup that you are confident in, like Saros, it might be beneficial for you to play Saros in that game and get Rene the rest that he needs.
Right.
Because we know that the playoffs are more taxing. You see players sapped of energy as the rounds go along, and with a guy who's 37, I mean, I'm worried about this in terms of with the Leafs, with a guy like Ron Hainsey. I would think that they would give him a couple days of rest before the playoffs, because we know Mike Babcock's going to play him 26, 27 minutes a night.
Right. Oh, you're absolutely right. There's no question about it. Last thing I think before we can touch on a little bit today is matchups in the playoffs, because there's starting to be some interesting calls on teams. And we always talk about this. We always say, teams can't play the matchups, and yet when they don't play the matchups, they sometimes get smoked, by it. We've seen the Rangers in the past a couple times, go for it and try and end up, winning games that they really would not have wanted to win because of who they're going to end up playing.
Right. And
Carolina's loss last night put the Islanders in a pretty safe spot as the third team, because before that it was if Carolina wins last night, it's a 2-point difference. Now it's back to a 5-point difference, right? So, or 4 points, I guess now.
Yeah, 95-91.
And we just talked about Carolina's schedule, and even though Carolina's got a game in hand, it can make it 2 points. It's still possible Carolina catches them, but Carolina's schedule, like we talked about, is going to be really, really hard.
Well, I think that the fact that Washington is 3 points up on both Pittsburgh and the Islanders, I mean, obviously it gives them the inside track on first place in the division. But Pittsburgh Islanders as a potential first-round match, I don't like that from the point of view of the Islanders. I think they would fit better against Carolina or maybe even Washington. I know Washington won the Stanley Cup, but I think that the type of game that they play was more conducive to playing Washington. I think Pittsburgh's going to roll over the Islanders. I do.
Well, and here's the thing. I think neither Washington nor Pittsburgh should really want to play Carolina right now, because Carolina is playing way better than the Islanders. There's no two ways about that. They are. I mean, they've been gaining on the Islanders like crazy. They're just a better hockey team right now.
I honestly, I think right now of the easiest opponent in the East would be Montreal.
I don't agree at all.
I mean, because I mean, Carey Price is a great goaltender, no doubt, and he can raise his level to steal games, but Montreal has shown, in spite of the fact that they scored, I think, 5 or 6 goals last night against Florida, that down the stretch they've had trouble scoring goals. Now they've been able to win games because they've limited the other teams and Price has played great. But I don't think that there's Jonathan Drouin is not producing the way that we got a great year out of Max Domi. Tatar has played pretty decently. Gallagher's Gallagher, but Drouin is not producing as well, and they don't have a ton of offense. And I think against a good team in a playoff scenario, it will be easy to shut Montreal down. They would have to win. They're going to have to win a lot of 2-1, 1-0 games, and when you're limited like that, you're not a tough opponent.
Well, they're definitely. They have their holes. They're a very young team. But I think what's happening is not that they're having trouble scoring down the stretch. It's just that they've decided to play defense down the stretch. And that they know obviously Julian knows that if you're going to have any success in the playoffs or even get to the playoffs, you're going to have to be better defensively. They've shown they can score. There's no question about it. So I think the idea here is, okay, let's see if we can shut teams down, and they've been very effective with shutting teams down.
Yeah, but the thing is, and I've written about this regarding the Leafs the last week or so. After they gave up 23 goals in 4 games, and they're playing in Philadelphia tonight.
Yeah.
Last week, Babcock said defense, 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 and they significantly cut down on shots on goal in games against Nashville, Buffalo. I think it was the Rangers.
Yeah.
Less than 30 shots in each game. Problem is they stop scoring in those games.
Right.
So they're devoting so much energy and so much detail to the defensive end of the ice that they're not able to convert offensively on their power plays or on 5-on-5. And the point of view of a good team is to be able to play at both ends of the ice at the same time. Tampa can do it. Washington can do it. Maybe Pittsburgh can do it. Right now, but maybe I think Boston can do it. I don't know if Toronto or any of the other teams in the East can.
Right. Yeah.
When Toronto won against Florida, they won 7-5. It was a wide open offensive affair. You're not going to see those games in the playoffs, and if you do, it'll be the first time since that Penguins Flyers series years ago.
Yeah, it is kind of interesting when you go through the teams in the East that are making the playoffs, and you try to ask yourself what is the best defensive team in there. And it is the Islanders. The Islanders are the best defensive team of the 8 teams in the playoffs. They
have goals against, yes,
and just in terms of and the ability to keep games low scoring and stuff like that. They've shown that they are the worst offensive team though, right? So, but that so that's why the Islanders are the Islanders are tricky in the playoffs because that kind of stuff tends to play in their favor. They also have to decide who they're going to go with in goal, and everybody thinks
it'll be Leonard.
It'll start Leonard maybe, but I don't know how long that will go, but we'll see. But I think the easiest team in the playoffs to play right now, if I was one to play somebody right now, I think would be Toronto, to be honest, because the Leafs just are giving up so many goals. Now that could all change, of course, when they get healthier, but Carolina right now is just.
I would argue that I think the Leafs could beat any of the either any of the wild card teams. I think they could beat the Islanders, although that would be a really entertaining series. I think they could beat Pittsburgh. I just don't know whether they can beat the 3 teams that they would likely have to get through to get to the Stanley Cup, which is Boston, Tampa, and Washington. Until you can do that, I don't know. Can you call them a serious contender if they are long shots to beat those teams? That's the question that I've been asking myself and analyzing all season is like, okay, until you make their defense better, are they a Stanley Cup contender? And my assertion is they're a great offensive team. They got Tavares, they got Matthews, they got Marner. They can't stop anybody when it counts. And they have to depend on Freddie Anderson to stand on his head. And if he doesn't, they'll lose. So,
right.
They
need huge. They're going to need incredible goaltending, and that there's no question about that. But stranger things can happen. Anderson can't get hot. I think that. I actually think that they match up better against Boston than most people do.
Yeah,
and I know that's gonna. I know that there's nothing historical there, but the one thing I'll say about, and this might be crazy. This is a crazy Eklund thing. I know people are going to say that, but
Mr. Counterintuitive.
The counterintuitiveness of hockey is, and I'm counterintuitive because this is a counterintuitive sport quite often. And what you find is, when everybody in the world thinks that a team's going to beat a team in a playoff series. Like everybody says Boston's going to beat a team in a playoffs, going to beat Toronto in the playoff series, is when it gets, a guy like Babcock can use that to his advantage.
Well, I mean, it does put pressure on Boston. Everybody's expecting
a ton of pressure on Boston, and the
but-
Leafs are very good at diverting pressure.
But the thing is, and there is a reason for that assumption, and the reason is and are the Leafs a better team than they were last season? Talent-wise, yes, but in the playoffs, they had veteran guys like Polak and Komarov that could offer a bit of pushback to when the Bruins try to take liberties. And believe me, in that series, Marchand, Backes, and those guys are going to run. And I'm not saying run them into the boards illegally, but they're going to take liberties on Tavares, on Matthews, and Marner. And the Leafs right now are basically turning the other cheek, getting the power, hoping to get the power play and score goals, and that's their deterrent. That doesn't work in the playoffs.
Right.
You don't get as many power plays as you normally do in the regular season, and they're the team in the league that has drawn the least amount of penalties. So you cannot depend on your power play to be your deterrent. You need players that push back, and they don't have many.
Right. No, they don't. They don't, for sure.
Let me just one thing, and this will be for future reference, and I'm sure we'll be covering this daily in the summer of 2020. It came out yesterday, and hasn't been confirmed yet, so it could still change. But Adam Fox, who's a defenseman for Harvard, who is up for the Hobey Baker, he's a Carolina product. He was acquired in the Dougie Hamilton deal, so he was drafted by Calgary, and now he's property of Carolina. It's come out that he's deciding to stay at Harvard for his senior year. This is the same path as Jimmy Vesey. He may win the Hobey Baker this year, and if he does, then every team in the world will line up to try to woo him to come, because he'll be an entry-level contract for 2 years, and teams like top teams like Tampa and Toronto and other teams as well will go after this guy because he is an NHL talent. And you can get him for the price of a contract, and that in this league where talent is king, and he's a skilled player too. He is going to be the Jimmy Vesey of 2020 if he does.
I was going to ask you, is he better than Vesey?
Well, I mean, Russ would be better to ask that, but I'll say this: I posed the question: will the hubbub and the pursuit of him be bigger than Vesey? And I think yes, because he's a defenseman and he's a right-hand shot.
Yeah, I think that's true.
So, there are so many teams out there that need right-hand shot defensemen, and he's not a big guy. I think he's 5'10" and 190 pounds. We'll talk about this with Russ tomorrow, but I think that the pursuit of him will dwarf Vesey.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're absolutely 100% right, just because of the defensive aspect of things. It is interesting. So Carolina is losing him, right? And
if he doesn't, their rights don't expire on him until July 1 of 2019. So he goes back for a senior season, but you don't expect anything to change because he's already made the decision. And then it's like VC, where if you remember, Nashville traded his rights to Buffalo. Once he goes down this path, he's going to free agency. That's definitely the aim. Unless there's a team out there that he specifically wants to go to, that his rights are traded to, he's going to go to July 1st as a free agent, and then they can't be signed until August 15th. So I think once this decision is announced one way or the other, if it is he's going back to Harvard, then fast forward to July of 2019.
All right, so August 15th.
August 15th.
2019 is going to be Fox Day. Is that what we're going to say?
Yes, it will be. Fox on the run.
We had VC Day.
Yeah, Fox on the run.
Fox. All right. We got one question, then we're going to get out of here.
Okay.
All right. So Vepsis in the chat room says, which one do you fear more, Mike? Leafs having to face the Bruins round 1 or the offseason ahead of the Leafs? When do you think considering Sheldon Keefe as head coach for the Leafs would come into question?
Okay. I don't fear anything. I think that the task in front of them in terms of Boston is, I mean, I think they would have rather played anybody other than Boston. And now they have to deal with the psychological aspects of the playing against the Bruins, who they lost in 7 games to, Jake Gardner with his -5, and them losing 3 or 4 games this year against them. It's all that chatter is going to be brought up before game 1, and they're going to have the ability to fight through that. And if they can do that, then it shows a lot of growth if they can beat Boston. If they don't beat Boston, I think the offseason will be very interesting, which will be good news for Hockey Buzz, because I am of the opinion that until they get another top 4 defenseman, they're not going anywhere. And the only way that they're getting a top 4 defenseman on top of Riley and Muzzin, and I think they need 2, because Hainsey may retire, or if they bring him back, he should be a bottom pairing guy, is to trade one of Nylander or Janssen or Kapanen. And I know Kyle Dubas doesn't want to do that, but for salary cap reasons and for asset management, you have to improve that defense. They have some young guys coming along, but guys like Timothy Liljegren and Rasmus Sandin aren't going to be able to be plugged in as a top 4 for probably a couple years. So you've got to go out and get that defenseman. And if they don't, then I think a lot of hubbub in Toronto next training camp is, why hasn't Kyle Dubas made this move? So it'll be a very interesting offseason either way.
Yeah. Well, yeah. No, it's going to be a fun one, because everywhere, and as much as you hear offer sheets are not happening, offer sheets are not happening, offer sheets are not happening, it is incredible how many times you hear offer sheets are happening right now. And
it's a scare tactic. That's
all. It's a scare tactic. It's when there's teams that are definitely willing to say it. There are some people who will tell you off the record that we're going to offer sheet this person or that person. And it's kind of interesting when they do that, because you always have to take that with a grain of salt. I mean, at the end of the day, offer sheets are very complicated. They're incredibly complicated.
It's interesting when they do that, and they're doing that behind the scenes. The thing is that if they have an inkling that a player on another team is willing to sign an offer sheet, isn't that tampering? You know what I'm saying? I mean,
well, no, they can just say they're going to offer sheet this player. It doesn't mean that
the player has to agree to the offer sheet, though.
Yeah, it doesn't mean that the player is going to agree to it. I mean, it's not really tampering in that situation.
Everybody's talking about Mitch Marner being offer sheeted because
the big thing is that Mitch Marner does have to agree to it. And yeah, we've talked about that. Yeah,
right. But do you think Braden Point is going to agree to to leave Tampa, where if they don't win a Stanley Cup, if they win a Stanley Cup, maybe he is open to doing that because they can't pay him what other teams might be able to pay him.
Right.
But yeah, that's the thing that is forgotten when it comes to offer sheets. Both sides have to agree. Ryan O'Reilly was anxious to get out of Colorado because they wouldn't pay him as much as Matt Duchene. That's the last offer sheet we've had.
Right.
If there's a situation out there where a player is dying to get out of a situation, then yes, I think there's a chance for it. But I don't see any of these big guys like Aho or Laine or Kyle Connor or Marner anxious to get out of the places that they're at.
Yeah. I think that's a good point. All right, let's do this. Okay. Lottery simulator. Here we go. I'm getting this. Yep, I had it already. I'm just fluid. Here we go. All right, here we go. Ready? His winner is Anaheim, the Anaheim Ducks.
That would be a welcome addition. The speed of Jack Hughes with the lumbering Anaheim Ducks.
Yeah, you can see here that they're only at a 6.5% chance of getting the first pick overall. So that's a big jump. They jumped up 6 points. Vancouver also jumps up 6 spots to number 2. So Florida 8 spots, number 3. So we're talking about a really crazy.
That's the best case scenario for Ottawa, finishing with the 4th pick. They would love that.
By far the best case scenario for them. And then, and for teams like the Kings and the Red Wings, all these teams falling 3 spots down. That's a tough spot for them to be in for sure. All right, folks. That's all the time we have for today. I am going to be blogging shortly here, and I have actually an interesting a little breaking news I'm going to put up on my blog. So check it out in a few minutes here. I have to do some calls, but I think I might have some information on the Seattle general manager position. So keep watching the website. Remember, without the buzz, it is just hockey. We will talk to you tomorrow.